I'm Roy Lee Lindsay with the North Carolina Pork Council, and I want everyone to remember bacon makes everything better.
Manny Diaz he is the first-year head coach of the Canes. We missed him at ACC kickoff in Charlotte. That was our fault, not his. Coach, welcome to the David Glenn Show. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you on. I lived in Miami for a while, and I remember your dad as the mayor of Miami. Since you are in a leadership position of a different kind, how do you describe the most important thing or things you learned from Dad, the former mayor, when it comes to leadership in the college football world?
Well, it's funny because when he was mayor, I was living in Raleigh at that time.
That's right.
It's been a great model for me that you have to set a vision. You have to be true to your vision. Even at times when there might be evidence to maybe panic or waver, and because people want to follow people who have a very concise vision and have a clear way of how to achieve it. And then you have to be able to handle the external, criticism that comes with the job. Whether that's in politics or football coaches. Generally, the one thing both of those jobs have in common is pretty much everybody thinks they can do it better than the person who's currently holding the job. So it takes you have to have a little bit of a thick skin and understand that that's part of what comes with the profession.
With that in mind, we talked with Coach Richt, and he's like, man, you could chart my popularity in the eyes of my own alma mater, Miami, and I was so popular when I was that guy with the Georgia Bulldogs. And yet, of course, when he was there in Coral Gables, they loved him sometimes. They were tough on him at other times. How has that gone for you, Coach? Because best I remember, when you were this hot up-and-coming defensive coordinator, masterminding the glitzy turnover chain and great numbers for the Hurricanes, everybody loved Manny Diaz. How did that contrast with, the aftermath of losing to Florida in your season opener?
Well, I think any coach would tell you the same thing, and this is almost along the lines we just spoke about with any leadership position. If you're the type of person that's sticking your head out the window to try to figure out, what the court of public opinion is saying, you're not going to last very long.
True.
And that's the idea of understanding that, whether you're us or whether you're Mac at UNC or anybody right now, you're just trying to get your team to become the best version of itself, and that's a season-long process. So like I said, we have a scoreboard every week, so we don't have to do polling ratings, like you do in politics. We have a pretty good idea where we stand.
Manny Diaz is with us, the Miami head coach. He's on Twitter at @coach_Manny Diaz. When I lived in Hollywood, Florida, way back, Miami had that, I guess it wasn't a 5-time national champion labeled quite yet, but, the Jimmy Johnson stuff, the Howard Schnellenberger stuff that you know so well. I've seen you use the hashtag TNM on social media representing the new Miami, but I've heard you say that it's not like you're just flushing the old Miami. So what does the new Miami keep about the old Miami, but also while modernizing it, I assume?
Correct. Well, Miami won for simple reasons. They got really, really good players, a lot of times that were not highly regarded by the recruiting services. And then they just went to work on these practice fields, and their level of competition and their work ethic and the way that they competed and everything they did during the off season, and that competitive spirit, it translated into the games. And that's why when you watch Miami play, they just, the confidence that they played with, that's where it came from. So there's no secret to it. So you can't seek the swagger first, right? It doesn't work that way. You have to understand all of the work that went into those teams playing with the confidence that they played with. And again, what gives you confidence? Being prepared gives you confidence in anything, whether it's, if you're a school-age kid and you're going in to take a test, if you study the test, if you know the material, you're going to walk into that test a lot more confident than if you haven't.
When you were at NC State under Chuck Amato, the word swagger actually applied really nicely to some of those outstanding Wolfpack teams. What do you remember about your family's time here in our statewide audience and about, what applied to those teams that maybe you're trying to apply now? What did the Chuck Amato part of your coaching tree contribute to who you are today with the Canes?
Well, first, we love living in the Triangle area. I've actually spent 6 years there, which the way this crazy coaching profession is, it's longer than I've lived anywhere.
Yeah.
Two of my 3 sons were born in Raleigh. So my wife has 2 degrees from postgraduate degrees from NC State. So it was a great time. It was great to see a program get built from the ground level because, again, I was a young coach, and all I had seen was I had come in at Florida State when they were really on top of the world, and I didn't understand what it took to get there. And seeing, to use the first 3 years as an example of, how we built a program and got it to the 2002 team that won 11 games and and then just all the things it takes to build a program and how we were able to build that defense, a couple of years later into the number 1 defense in the country. And then just the trick was being able to match it up with the quarterback, which sometimes that's a part of it. To be honest, it's a little bit what happened to us last year at Miami. We had an outstanding defense and we were very young and had some shaky moments on offense. And that's just all part of college football. Sometimes it's just hard to get it timed up right where, you've got a special, you can be special on both sides of the ball. But I thought Chuck built that program and that fan base and the way they supported the team is something we'll always have fond memories of.
It's funny, Phillip Rivers on one of the teams that you coached, or several, is an example of one of the greatest true freshman quarterbacks in the history of college football, and certainly in our neighborhood. Saturday night in Chapel Hill, you've got true freshman Sam Howell lining up behind center for Mac Brown, your opponent. And I know your guy is a redshirt, but Jaron Williams will be yet another freshman at the most important position on the field. I read, Coach, that you're the first new Miami head coach to choose a freshman as your starting quarterback since 1964. I mean, before even I was alive. What about Jaron made you pick him over more experienced quarterbacks? And how do you assess at this point, his first step, if you will, against the Florida Gators?
Well, Dan Enos does a great job. He's our offense coordinator and quarterbacks coach, and he does a great job of mentoring those guys. And we had a pretty steadfast formula for who would be our starting quarterback. And number one, you had to be able to avoid the critical error. You hold the ball on every play, so you've got as easy of a chance to get us beat as anybody else in the stadium on any given night. So, don't burn down the building is number one. And then number two, in this offense, there was an answer for the quarterback in basically every passing concept we have. You just have to understand where to go with the ball. So it really turns into decision-making. Can you solve the riddle on where the ball should go predicated on the coverage? And then secondly, accuracy. Do you have the accuracy to get it there? And then the final element is do you have the ability to perhaps do something maybe a little bit off script, a little bit special, where if things break down, you're going to go to the right guy, but the protection breaks down. You can extend a play, keep your eyes down the field, and make something happen. And all 3 of the quarterbacks in our competition really elevated their game, and we felt we could have won with all 3 of them. Jaron just was the best in all of those categories. Then we stuck him into a very hostile environment in Orlando against one of the top defensive fronts in all of college football. And Jaron never blinked. I would say Jaron and actually if you look at the performance of Sam Howell on Saturday, I thought they were very similar. They were both very poised and calm for guys really playing their first college football. So and when the team everybody on the football team watches the quarterback on every play. So when all those guys on the sideline see that your quarterback is calm under pressure, that gives everybody a sense of, hey, we have a chance today.
Manny Diaz is joining us. He's the first-year head coach at the University of Miami. Other than Texas A&M's visit to Clemson, I think the Canes at the Tar Heels is one of the more compelling matchups really in all of college football. We're bringing our big tailgate tour. Coach, that's our version of a bunch of tents and games and goofiness and prizes and stuff. Not going to be on your radar, but it's our way of celebrating this great matchup on Saturday night in Chapel Hill. You were, best I understand, the mastermind of the glitzy turnover chain, which now has a new wrinkle, I think, with the 305. We saw a couple of versions of it. Man, that's some serious bling. Is everybody copycatting from you over these last 3 years? I see a turnover towel. I see a turnover whiteboard now. How did that come about, and what makes it special even now that you've graduated to head coach, since you guys still have a version of it?
Well, we were not the first to have a turnover prop, so we can't claim to have invented that. we certainly have the best one. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Hey, guess what? It turns out that 18 to 22-year-olds love having thick gold chains around their neck. So, but we weren't even thinking about that. All we wanted was more turnovers in 2017. We had a good year in defense. 2016, we were top 15 in almost every category. We were not good in creating turnovers. So, hey, whatever it took, and it kind of started from there and took on a life of its own. We did not understand or foretell the sort of impact it would have with our fan base and nationally. But once it kind of picked up momentum, it has become a thing, and then it had an offspring this past year. We've got our touchdown rings for the offense, because when I became the head coach, those guys started looking at me with these little baby eyes, like, Coach, what about us? We're your players too. So we had to come up with something to change the chain. The chain will always be for the defense, but now our guys on offense, they have something to give them incentive to get that ball across the goal line.
I've known Mack Brown, Coach, since 1987, and I've always described him as a master of relationships. So we had him on our show yesterday, and I said, how do you deal with a relationship when you not only had to let Manny Diaz, this week's opponent, go during your time together at Texas, you actually let him go in the month of September, which just sounds, 10 times more painful. And he said he's gotten to know your family a little bit. He covered you during his years at ESPN. He considers you a friend, and you just turn the page and move on. Meanwhile, you could guess this. Miami football fans are like, man, if Coach Diaz has a chance to run it up against the Tar Heels, he's going to remember what happened 6 years ago. How do you view that personal aspect of this business trip on Saturday night?
Well, I think Mac is right. First of all, is that, just over time, and again, we've crossed paths on multiple occasions, and text back and forth. So, I think that personal relationship is there and is intact. But, it's very similar. Last week we played Florida, and, Dan Mullen, who I've worked for twice. And, once the game starts, you're really not cognizant of who's on the other sideline. Yeah. And no one is coming to the stadium to watch the coach's coach. Everybody's coming to watch the players play. And, ultimately those will be the guys that will decide it. So I'm sure he's got his hands full trying to get them to play better than they played a week ago, despite the fact they won. And we have our hands full trying to get our guys to play better than we did against Florida.
Last thing for you. You mentioned Sam Howell, the quarterback, but what else, anything else, either side of the ball, what jumped out at you on video about the Tar Heels in their win over the Gamecocks in Charlotte?
Well, a lot of what we've already known. I mean, we've always had a lot of respect for their running backs. They did a great job in the running game and blocked things up very well. Defensively, they played very fast defensively. They've got a really good coaching staff and all these things that we knew. And I think the thing that they will be most proud of, and you can just listen to the quotes coming out, is just when you come in as a first-year coach and a first-year staff, you're really just trying to change the mentality and the mindset and the culture, because those things make schemes better. Right, and it's easy to point to the plays that people run, but the belief that the players have that something good is about to happen, and I think that's when you're able to come from behind against a team like South Carolina. I think that's more telling into a little bit of the look inside of the culture of the program, and you want to know that it's real, because every new first-year head coach is always going to say, well, we're going to be better because of X, Y, and Z, but you got to get out there on the grass, and you have to make it real. So I think that's the thing that really stood out. And that's the thing about college football. It's a new year every year. We like to think that we all have recency bias, but there's always surprises every year. So it's no one is going to this game with the sins of 2018 on their back. It's a new week, and it's a new season.
I have no idea how well 45-year-old Manny Diaz dances in the locker room or otherwise, but what did you think of the 68-year-old Mack Brown's viral dance in Charlotte? Did you happen to catch it?
Maybe I've already seen him dance.
Maybe that's true.
Maybe behind closed doors, at Texas. No. No. Hey, look, I know this, and it's hard to win.
Yeah.
And wins should be celebrated, and so it's I think it's fun for everybody.
Thanks, Coach. Appreciate your time on the David Glenn Show. Good luck on your trip to Chapel Hill.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
You got it. Manny Diaz, first-year head coach of the Miami Hurricanes.